We have with us Ahmadi Ali, who is a scholar of sanctions and economic statecraft. He is an executive fellow at the Geneva Center for Security Policy and an analyst at Gulf State Analytics. Thank you so much, Ali, for joining us. Let's talk about Trump's optimism. He says that the war is very close to over, covering both Iran and Lebanon in his statement. White House seems optimistic suddenly. Iran called for peace after meeting with Pakistan's army chief, but Iran has not confirmed a second round of direct talks yet. Trump's optimism, what do you think it is based on? Is it something specific in the channel, a position, a response, a signal from Tehran, or is it primarily a coercive diplomacy, a pressure tool, in your opinion?
I think the Trump administration, and specifically Donald Trump himself, expressing optimism is more a matter of basically framing things in a way that manipulates the markets the best. Obviously, the notion that their peace might come any second now is what's helped the U.S. stock market rally. It's what's helped keep Brent crude prices down for the time being, despite physical oil being more expensive. And these are very important things to Donald Trump in terms of managing this conflict as it goes on. Based on what happened in the previous round in Islamabad, the U.S. was not very very flexible in its negotiating position. A lot of the harsher positions regarding the Iranian nuclear program came right back, and that really sort of stopped things from reaching any kind of positive conclusion. So, a few days ago, he was on Fox Business Channel telling Maria Bartiromo that, he doesn't want just 80% of what he wants or 90, 95%. He wants 100% of what he wants from Iran. And that's the advice that's the counsel that he's given his negotiators. Under these circumstances, these kinds of pronouncements about how peace is not far away is either just him being overly optimistic for reasons that aren't entirely clear, or just trying to manipulate the markets.
Right. He is linking Iran and Lebanon as a single arc. Do you see it as such?
Well, I think Iran does see it as such. Obviously, Hezbollah, non-state actor, very close ally of Iran, entered this conflict fairly soon in the conflict, a couple of weeks after it started. Hezbollah was pronounced dead basically for the last year and a half after conflict it had with Israel about a year and a half ago. And it came back with a tremendous amount of strength. At some point, they were firing, I think, like 100 missiles into Israel a day. And so for Iran, it is important not to abandon Hezbollah or Lebanon in general. Now, of course, Lebanon is a complicated country full of different factions, including, factions, Sunni factions. Even some of the Christian factions are not necessarily very positive towards Iran. And so there's a complicating factor involving what the government of Lebanon, which those factions currently, for the most part, control, is doing with its conversations with Israel. So it's been a complicated factor, but Iran certainly considers the two issues linked. And the ceasefire was supposed to apply to Lebanon. It was set to apply to Lebanon. The U.S. agreed that it applied to Lebanon. The Pakistani prime minister said it applied to Lebanon. And then after, according to the New York Times, a conversation with Netanyahu, Trump suddenly decided that it doesn't apply to Lebanon. And so this conflict has been continuing to rage.
What do you think of the negotiations happening in Washington with Marco Rubio looking after the Lebanese and Israeli side? They are talking after 1983. There is intense firing continuously going on. Netanyahu has war aims we all know of. Do you think it's going anywhere with Hezbollah not in the room or Iran not in the room?
I think the negotiations that are taking place there are not necessarily ceasefire negotiations in the orthodox sense. I absolutely don't believe that the Israelis are really interested in ceasing their military operations in Lebanon. In fact, if anything, they seem to want Lebanese government cooperation in their offensive against Hezbollah. The Lebanese military hasn't really shown the capacity or the willingness to really stand up to the Israeli military. That's kind of why Hezbollah exists to begin with. It was created back in the 1980s when southern Lebanon was under Israeli occupation. Right now, the Israelis want to basically slice up southern Lebanon into various spheres that either they completely control or they partially control. And obviously, the goal here is a larger annexation of at least some parts of southern Lebanon. And the Lebanese government doesn't really see itself in a position to fight back against it. And there's obviously a lot of friction between the different communities in Lebanon right now.
How much of this is really about Netanyahu's political future? He clearly had three war aims, none fully achieved. He's running a coalition government, managing a legal trial, watching European support going away. What does Netanyahu actually need in a deal to be able to sell it domestically, and maybe out of that we could enjoy some peace as well?
I don't think Netanyahu's really interested in peace of any kind. He has military aims. He was opposed to the ceasefire regarding just even Iran. He doesn't want a deal to happen between Iran and the U.S. Been very, very vocal about that. And with Lebanon, there's absolutely no sign that the Israelis would be willing to accept anything other than essentially unconditional surrender, which they're not going to get from Hezbollah. So what his aims are is hard to say. Obviously, his corruption trial has been postponed for another few months because of, there's war, and so the prime minister can't be prosecuted. Whether he can actually be prosecuted within the Israeli political system, because he's obviously, the center of Israeli politics by a lot. He doesn't really have real opposition at this point. It's not really an orthodox democracy like a European country would be. But it is certainly the case that if Israel was to actually stop fighting, then it would have to kind of take stock of the last few years of fighting, and for all the destruction and for all the bombs and all that, what has it actually accomplished? Very, very little. I mean, Hezbollah was supposed to be destroyed. It wasn't. Hamas hasn't even really been destroyed entirely. It still exists in some way. This war with Iran, with the U.S. playing this sort of central lead figure in it, was supposed to be the end of Iran. That clearly hasn't happened. Iran now controls the Strait of Hormuz. So I think for Netanyahu, the danger may be that what happens when kind of the rally around the flag effect that war creates in societies, what happens when that ends, and suddenly he has to be held account for what all of these years of war and the destruction and the problems that it's brought and the collapse of Israel's reputation in the West. What has that actually achieved for Israel? The answer is, it's not going to be pretty, because the answer is not very much at all.
Yeah, there is a story in New York Times from yesterday that says that people returning from bunkers with April 22nd looming above us are asking questions that why did we started this war in the first place if we haven't got to the actual logical end. But do you think in a supposed case, if Netanyahu is replaced by any other leader, his right flank is so it has a right base in terms of the kind of society Netanyahu is, the way they frame the whole architecture around the greater Israel? Do you think it would make a difference if Netanyahu is gone?
Well, it would make a difference in the sense that a future Israeli prime minister wouldn't be this sort of all-consuming political and cultural figure that Netanyahu is in the center of Israeli society. Probably wouldn't have the networks that Netanyahu has right off the bat, at least in Washington. Obviously, Netanyahu's principal job of getting Washington to do what Israel wants has been sort of his key accomplishment, really, over the course of 20 years or so that he's been prime minister. And of course, he's been in Israeli politics long before even that. So that would create sort of a problem for Israel in that respect. But the rest of the Israel isn't really a democracy. There is an ideological underpinning to the Israeli state, which is, Zionism. Obviously.
Very obvious, yeah.
Yeah, and so when you look at, it's an extremely right-wing society and has become more so over time. So the only real competition there is really
that's
on the
where
right.
I want to hammer that
Right,
the ideological bent in the society, it doesn't matter whosoever the leader is. I think the society is taking the decisions here.
Yeah, I mean, the war in Iran, here's case in point. The war in Iran is popular in literally one country in the world, and that's Israel. It's not popular in America at all. It's not popular in the European countries. It's only popular in Israel. And if Netanyahu's replaced, he would be replaced with someone to the right of him. And even if you were to go to Yair Lapid, who's supposedly the left-wing alternative to Netanyahu, and Lapid has been criticizing Netanyahu about not having been able to accomplish anything. But Lapid also wants to, raise the Gaza, wants to colonize Lebanon. The Greater Israel Project is really it's spread across the political spectrum in Israel. This is not a Netanyahu problem as much as some people in the West who are generally friendly to Israel, but have realized how badly Israel's reputation has collapsed there, will say, oh, well, if only it's Netanyahu's fault this has happened. But no, Netanyahu is really just a creation of Israeli government, of Israeli society. Really.
Right. 7 days, April 22nd, the ceasefire expires. If there is no deal by then, if Trump's optimism does not translate into a signed agreement, what happens next, in your opinion? Does the blockade resume in full? Does Israel see the expiry as an opening for further military escalation? What is the scenario for you?
I mean, I think that what's realistic is that we're probably going to have one more round of talks before that expiration date. It's probably going to be in Islamabad. There's been talk about it being elsewhere just because logistically it's kind of difficult for the U.S. team. But for now, it seems like Islamabad will be where those talks take place. Based on what happened in the first round, I don't think this is probably going to be very fruitful because of the U.S. Lack of flexibility on the part of the U.S. When there is some talk about extending the ceasefire for perhaps another week, Donald Trump has, presented various ultimatums expiring in, I believe, April 26th. That's, 4 or 5 days after the expiration of the ceasefire.
Right.
The U.S. is also moving more assets into the region. And, from an Iranian perspective, especially the perspective of the Iranian military, what Trump says doesn't matter at all. U.S. troop movements need to be looked at. And so U.S. sending another aircraft carrier, sending more
The
troops
real
into the Middle East.
signals that they are militarily sending, that is what to